Today, American politics is an absolute joke. Straight up, man. We have huge corporations running around controlling every single level of politics, federal, state, and even local. These huge corporations, as well as greedy billionaires, inject billions of dollars each year into the political system, demanding that our own elected officials make the establishment's agenda a reality. This corruption has led to many changes over the past few decades, which have destroyed the American middle class and the American dream. All of this democracy-destroying corruption has been made possible by these same politicians tweaking the rules of our political system behind the backs of the American people. You see, after the whole episode of Richard Nixon and Watergate in the early 1970s, the American people came out and demanded sweeping changes to our political system. We established a clear set of campaign finance laws, which heavily restricted the money that politicians can receive from certain groups. It ensured that the integrity of our democracy remained intact. But as soon as we came, we left, and the politicians immediately began carefully chipping away at these laws, little by little, over the next couple of decades, allowing more and more big money interests to influence American politics. It is no coincidence that as our democracy crumbled, so went the American dream and the middle class. Income inequality rose to new heights as the rich got richer and the poor got poorer. It became a daily struggle for the average American family. The policymakers were no longer there to represent us. They were there to represent the establishment. All of this nonsense came to a head when the Supreme Court decided in 2010 that corporations are people and should be allowed to contribute huge sums of money to whatever candidate of their choosing. It was in a case between an organization called Citizens United and the Federal Election Committee, the FEC, and this brought what little democracy that we had left crashing to the ground. The highest court in the land said that non-profit corporations can contribute unlimited sums of money to any political organization as long as it's not tied to any actual candidate. Well, that had an easy loophole. The loophole is called a super PAC, or political action committee. Corporations and greedy billionaires contribute unlimited sums of money to these organizations, and these organizations simply take that money and divvy it up to whatever candidate of these corporations choosing. So it's literally, at the end of the day, corporations and the ultra-rich buying elections. Because with that money comes the promise that these corporations and the ultra-rich's agenda becomes that politician's ultimate priority, not the American people's. Because the average American doesn't have unlimited sums of money. But this stark reality became ever more clear to the American people as time wore on. The artificial nature of these politicians bothered us. Their lies, their empty promises frustrated us. But eventually frustration turned into apathy. In the 2014 midterm elections, only 36.4% of eligible voters turned out to cast their ballots. That probably played a role in the Republican slaughter of the Democrats which occurred that night. But just think about that. Only 36% of people over 18 came out to decide who will be running our country. That was the lowest number since World War II. The American political system obviously needs sweeping reforms. But what exactly are the changes that we can make? Well, number one, it is time to get money out of politics. The only people that should be allowed to donate to our politicians are the American people themselves, not huge corporations and big money interests. Corporations are not people. People are people. We should be the only ones who can fund our own elected officials. Simple as that. Number two, there should be universal voter registration, meaning that the government, not the people themselves, are responsible for the registration of voters. None of this voter ID law crap, the voter card crap. No, the government should just automatically consider that anyone in their database registered to vote at the age of 18. We live in the 21st century. Keeping track of this information should be easy. And once people come to vote, let them vote. What people don't understand is that voter fraud, which they automatically use in defense of this, is very rare. I mean non-existent rare. Of the over 1 billion voter ballots cast, a recent study found that there were only 31, yes, 31 real cases of voter fraud. 31 in a billion. But we're so scared of a 31 in a billion chance that voter fraud will occur that we enact voter ID laws, which have been proven to disproportionately affect minorities. According to yet another study, black young adults were 73% of the time asked for voter ID when they voted. Latino young adults, they were asked for voter ID 60% of the time. But for whites, it was only 50% of the time. Even in states where voter ID laws were not even on the books, black young adults were asked for IDs 66% of the time. 55% for Latinos, but for whites, it was just 43% of the time. Universal voter registration, I'm telling you, man. A third of people are not registered to vote. That's a problem. You should make it as easy as possible for anyone over the age of 18 in this country to vote. If you don't, the democratic process is not pure, full, and complete. Third, enough of this electoral college nonsense. Most people don't realize that when they vote in the presidential election, their votes are not directly deciding who becomes the leader of the free world. Instead, it's really 538 people in the electoral college. Each state's number of electors that they send to the electoral college is determined by how many representatives they have in both the House and the Senate combined. For example, California, it has 53 people in the House of Representatives and then only 2 in the Senate, therefore 55 electors. In Wyoming, on the other hand, it has only 1 representative, but 2 senators, therefore 3 electors. So here's how it works. State by state, whichever candidate won your state in the popular vote, regardless of by how large or small a margin it was, that candidate gets all of the elector votes for that state. But here's why that's ridiculous. Let's say a candidate wins big in California, 55 votes, and you deserve just about all of them because you won by huge margins. But let's say you lose Texas by a very small margin, half a percentage point. I mean, it came down to the wire. The other candidate gets all 38 of those votes. That's how that clown, George Bush, beat Al Gore back in 2000. Al Gore actually won the popular vote, but it was so close in Florida that they had to do a recount. And Florida has a lot of people, therefore, a lot of electoral votes. In the recount, Bush came out by just a little teeny tiny weeny bit, and even that is debatable, because of course, who was governor of Florida at the time? Jeb Bush, his brother. We don't know what was going on that supposed recount, but regardless, Bush edges out on top, and all of the votes for Florida, all 29 of them, go to George Bush, and he wins that election, because the Electoral College is the one who decides who is president. Not the people themselves. Not the people in this so-called democracy where the people rule. But 538 people decide. Ridiculous. We have got to seriously rethink our political system because it is holding the United States of America back from its full potential. We could have the greatest middle class in the world with the most educated workforce in the world. We could be leading the front on all of the world's most pressing issues. We could be the true global force for good that all these politicians talk about. But we're not. Why? Because the system is inefficient and corrupt. Our policymakers are only there to represent the establishment because the establishment is the one who got them there in the first place. And even if they were fighting for the interests of regular people, a third of the country couldn't even come out to participate in the democratic process and decide what direction our country should go in because they can't even vote. But even then, those votes don't even matter because we're stuck in an outdated system where 538 people are the ones who really decide who the leader of the free world is. 538 electors. No, that's wrong. All of that is wrong. Fix this broken system now if we want a real change. Thank you all for listening to New Progressive Era. Remember to hit that subscribe button, spam that like button, and follow me on Twitter at New Liberal Era.